There was a city that never slept, and somewhere inside it lived a woman who had forgotten how to rest. Grace walked through streets that glowed with neon light, the hum of traffic filling the space where silence should have been. The world around her was alive, but inside, she felt hollow, like an echo of the life she once knew. She worked long hours, chasing success that never seemed to fill her. Her apartment was neat, expensive, and empty. Every night she came home, dropped her keys on the marble counter, and listened to the quiet hum of loneliness. There were no pictures on the walls, no laughter, no warmth. Only the faint memory of her mother's voice whispering her name from a time that felt like another lifetime. Grace hadn't spoken to Evelyn in 8 years. Not since that night when words turned into storms, and silence became safer than truth. She had walked away, angry, proud, certain that distance would protect her heart. But distance doesn't protect, it only delays the ache. Some nights, she dreamed of home. Not the house, but the feeling. The smell of rain on the porch, her mother's humming from the kitchen, the way the light used to spill across the living room floor. But when morning came, she buried those memories under work, noise, and the city's endless rush. Then one cold November morning, a letter arrived. It wasn't typed. It wasn't from a company or a bill collector. It was handwritten. Her name written in the same careful script she'd seen on every birthday card of her childhood. It was from Evelyn. Grace held the letter for a long time before opening it. Her hands trembled slightly, and her chest felt tight, as if her body already knew what her heart would feel. Inside were only a few words, written in black ink that looked faded from tears. I miss you. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'd like to see my daughter one more time. No anger, no guilt. Just love written in the simplest form. Grace sat at her kitchen table for hours, staring at the letter. The city moved outside, cars, voices, life, but she couldn't hear any of it. She thought of calling. Then she thought of everything that had been said, everything that hadn't. Forgiveness wasn't simple. It never is. But sometimes love doesn't ask for perfect timing. It just asks for a return. So that night, for the first time in years, Grace packed a small bag. She looked at the skyline through her window, the city that had taught her ambition but stolen her peace, and whispered quietly, "It's time to go home." The journey home was quieter than Grace remembered. The train windows blurred with rain, and every drop that slid down the glass felt like a thought she had tried to forget. She watched towns drift past, small gas stations, fields painted gold with harvest, houses that still believed in front porches and open doors. Each mile backward felt like peeling away a layer of armor she had worn for years. In the corner of the carriage sat an old couple holding hands. They didn't speak much, just sat there, fingers entwined, sharing the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Grace found herself staring at them and thinking of Evelyn, of the way her mother used to reach across the dinner table just to brush her hand, smiling at nothing, smiling just because her daughter was there. She remembered how she used to pull away, too busy, too grown, too hurt to see how much love lived in those small gestures. Now she wished she had held that hand longer. The train stopped near a town she once called home. The air was colder here, sharper, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. She stepped off, her heels sinking slightly into the muddy ground, her breath rising in clouds. Everything looked smaller, the streets, the shops, even the sky. Time had softened the colors of her past, but the memories were still sharp. The old post office, the bakery with the red door, the field where she and her mother used to watch sunsets, sharing stories wrapped in laughter and blankets. She took a slow breath, and then she walked down the road that led to a small white house at the edge of town. the one with the faded blue shutters and a porch swing that creaked with age. Her heart thudded louder with every step. There were flowers by the gate. Evelyn's flowers. Grace remembered planting them as a child, marigolds and wild daisies, bright things that refused to stop growing even when neglected. The front door was slightly open. A soft light flickered inside. And then she saw her. Evelyn sat by the window in a wooden chair, a knitted blanket around her shoulders, her hands resting quietly on her lap. The years had drawn gentle lines across her face, but her eyes, those same deep, kind eyes, still glowed with warmth. For a long moment neither spoke. The air held their silence like something sacred. Then Evelyn whispered, almost afraid it was a dream. "Grace?" Grace's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but words were too small for everything inside her. Regret, love, grief, relief. So instead, she stepped forward. Slowly, carefully. And then she did what she hadn't done in 8 years. She knelt beside her mother, took her hands, and pressed them against her face. The hands that once braided her hair. The hands that once held her through storms. They were thinner now, colder, but still carried the same strength, the kind that only mothers have. No one said I'm sorry. No one said I forgive you. Because sometimes love doesn't need words. It just needs to be held again. The next morning began with quiet sunlight. It filtered through lace curtains, falling across Evelyn's kitchen table. The same one that had held decades of breakfasts, birthdays, and letters left unopened. Dust motes danced in the air, slow and graceful, like time itself had softened its steps for them. Grace stood by the window, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. The house smelled of cinnamon and old wood, the scent of her childhood. Evelyn hummed softly in the background, a tune Grace hadn't heard since she was little. It was the same lullaby she used to sing whenever storms rattled the windows. The same song that once made Grace feel safe. Now it made her eyes sting. Evelyn's voice was weaker but steady, filled with a peace that only comes after years of learning to let go. She glanced up and smiled. "You still take your tea too strong," she said. Grace smiled back. "You still put too much sugar." And for a moment, a fragile, beautiful moment, they were mother and daughter again. Later, they sat outside on the porch swing, wrapped in old quilts. The trees were bare, the ground soft with frost, and the distant hills looked like they were holding their breath. Evelyn's voice broke the silence. "I used to watch the road every morning," she said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Didn't matter if it rained, snowed, or the world fell apart. I kept hoping one day I'd see you walking back up that path." Grace swallowed hard. "I thought you hated me." Evelyn turned to her, eyes full of a calm sadness. "I could never hate you. I only missed you." The words landed softly, like snow, like forgiveness. Grace felt tears slide down her face before she even noticed them. "I was scared, Mom. I didn't know how to fix it. After Dad died, I thought I was broken." Evelyn reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched her daughter's cheek. "We all break, honey. That's how the light gets in." Grace let out a small laugh through her tears. "That's something Dad used to say." Evelyn smiled. He was right. He usually was. They sat together until the sky turned gold, watching the sun fall behind the hills. The air was cold, but neither moved. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It's the quiet decision to stay. That night, Grace found an old photo album in the living room. Inside were memories pressed between pages, a lifetime of birthdays, scraped knees, and first days of school. There was one photo of her, maybe 12 years old, standing beside her father's truck, holding a trophy with both hands. Evelyn had written beneath it in careful, neat handwriting. She believed she could. Grace ran her fingers over the words, her heart aching. When Evelyn came in, she saw her daughter staring at the photo. "Do you remember that day?" she asked. Grace nodded. "You said I could do anything if I just kept trying." Evelyn smiled faintly. "And I still believe that." That winter, Grace stayed. She cooked meals, fixed the old porch rail, read aloud to Evelyn in the evenings. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. The silence between them was no longer heavy, it was healing. The snow came in soft waves, wrapping the town in white. And within that quiet world, a broken bond was slowly stitched back together. Not perfectly, but beautifully. Because love, when it returns, never comes back the same. It comes back wiser. The snow melted slowly that year. It didn't rush, it lingered, as if it knew the world still needed time to breathe. Small rivers began to form along the edges of the road, and the sound of dripping water filled the mornings. The earth was waking up again. Grace could feel it, not just in the air, but inside her. Something was stirring, something alive. She had started tending the garden behind the house, Evelyn's garden, once full of roses and lavender. The soil was cold, hard at first, but Grace worked it with her hands day after day. There was something healing about it. The rhythm, the patience, the way growth began quietly, beneath the surface. Every seed she planted felt like an apology. Every bloom that came after felt like forgiveness. Evelyn would sit by the window, wrapped in her shawl, watching her daughter work. Her eyes followed Grace's every movement, not out of worry anymore, but pride. "She's come home," she would whisper to herself. "My girl finally came home." Some evenings, they'd sit outside with mugs of tea, the air filled with the smell of damp soil and the sound of crickets. Grace would tell her stories, about the city, about nights when she couldn't sleep, about people she met but never really knew. Evelyn would listen quietly, sometimes reaching out to hold her hand. And when the silence came, it no longer felt empty. One morning, a letter arrived. It was from a local art center, a small place in town that offered painting and writing classes. Grace had sent in an old short story months ago, not thinking much of it. They wanted her to teach. When she told Evelyn, her mother's eyes filled with tears. "You always had your father's gift," she said softly. "He told me once that your words could heal people." Grace smiled. "Maybe they're finally healing me." The weeks passed gently. The house filled with life again. With laughter, music, the smell of bread baking. But one morning, Grace found Evelyn sitting quietly on the porch, her eyes far away. "Mom," she whispered. Evelyn turned, smiling faintly. "Do you hear that?" Grace listened. The soft wind, the rustle of leaves, a bird's song breaking the morning stillness. "It's spring," Evelyn said. "Your father always said spring was God's way of saying we get another chance." Grace knelt beside her. "You gave me that chance, Mom." Evelyn shook her head, her hand resting gently on her daughter's. "No, sweetheart. You gave it to yourself." That night, as the stars bloomed across the dark sky, Evelyn slipped into sleep. Calm, peaceful, her breathing light as a whisper. Grace stayed by her side, holding her hand until dawn painted the room gold. When morning came, Evelyn was gone. But she hadn't really left. Her shawl still hung by the chair. Her teacup still rested on the table. Her voice still echoed in the house, in the lullabies, in the laughter, in every word Grace wrote after. Grace buried her mother beneath the oak tree, next to her father. The wind was soft that day, carrying the scent of lilacs. Before leaving, she placed a small piece of paper under the soil, a letter she had written the night before. It said only one thing: "I came home, and I'll keep going, just like you taught me." The following months were gentle and golden. Grace taught her first class, met people who shared their own stories of loss, healing, and coming home. Among them was Daniel, quiet, kind, patient. He didn't try to fix her. He simply listened. And one day, Grace found herself smiling again, really smiling. Not because she forgot the pain, but because she had learned to carry it softly. Years later, a young girl visited her writing workshop, nervous, shy, unsure of her place in the world. Grace sat beside her, handed her a pen, and said, "Write it all down. Even the pain. Especially the pain. That's where the truth lives." The girl nodded, and Grace saw a reflection of herself, years ago, lost, searching, afraid. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Grace walked home, her heart full. The house glowed warmly from within, a light in every window. And for the first time in her life, she didn't just feel at home. She was home.